Hello, it is Monday, the 7th of September 2020, and I am, with this reading, finishing the chapter 7, which was entitled, or is entitled, Revelations. The book is Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth and is written by Stuart Holroyd, and it was published in 1977. And we are now at a part of the book where they have already undertaken several journeys on behest of the management or the Council of Nine, who are preparing Earth for a landing of their species. And it's a very fascinating book. I think it was very popular in the 70s and 80s. But then there was another one called The Only Planet of Choice, which was published in 1993. So they did a lot of work, these people. Unfortunately, Phyllis passed away in 2013. But it's a pleasure to read it, and I shall continue now with the ending of it. They had a little bit of interpersonal problems, and each of them was on their own personal, still feeling journey, really. Anyway, page 257, Revelations. At this time and over the past few days, there had been a number of odd events in the house. All the clocks had started going haywire, jumping 90 minutes ahead or falling 90 minutes behind the correct time. There had been many paranormal movements of objects and things like coins and keys apparently dropping from the ceiling. Sometimes they were things that nobody in the house had ever seen before. For instance, 2 coins appeared on the floor of John's bedroom side by side, and on examination, one turned out to be an Israel coin and the other an Arab coin. Whether these events helped Andrija over his crisis of confidence, I do not know. But the day after John's solo communication with Tom, he was back in the cage, it's the Faraday cage, and he began the session by reaffirming his commitment. "Welcome, Tom," he said. "We have come to redirect ourselves to the Nine and to the cause of peace on Earth, and we confess that we have lost our way temporarily with regard to immediate tasks, direction and purpose, and we want to start a fresh dialogue which will bring us back to the path of the Nine on Earth. So perhaps you could begin by assessing for us the present international situation and telling us what you would have us do to be of aid." Tom said, "Your planet Earth is in a time of confusion, and the nation of Israel is in serious situation. For aggressions are planned at the time of the holidays that you call Passover and Easter. But we can give you this promise, that with your prayers, with your dedication, and with your permission, that the civilizations working for what you would call the light may use your physical energies to stop aggressive acts. The nation of Israel will be sustained." Andrija asked, "What civilizations are these that would give us our energies to? That we would give our energies to?" Tom, "We are speaking of the civilizations that are involved in the saving. Those of Hoover, of Aragon, and of Altea are the 3 of major importance." Andrija and John had no hesitation in giving their permission, and they had said that they were sure they could also speak for Phyllis, who was in a trance to communicate this communication. They should then arrange, Tom said, to be in Israel by the 13th of March 1975. It was now the 7th of March, my birthday. And he proceeded to give a scenario of the events that could lead up to a major concerted offensive against Israel at the end of the month. There would be, he said, a stepping up of guerrilla activities, first from Syria and Lebanon, which would appear to be the work of a small independent groups, but would in reality be an organized national project. And at the end of the month approached Saudi Arabia, and reluctantly Jordan would become involved. If the plans, as at present laid out, were carried through, there would eventually be a full-scale missile war. Andrija asked if there wasn't any danger of the Israelis learning about the Arab plans and launching a preemptive attack. Tom, with you in the area, you will also temper the nation of Israel. If you will do what we say, your energies will be used in two ways and two areas, and the timing is important in order for the leaders of Israel to be of open mind and not to become also aggressive. It is important that you spend a minimum of 3 of your first days at Megiddo. It is a source of energy. Andrija asked how many of them should go to Israel, and Tom said that only the 3 were needed. But if you wish others to go, if they will not deplete your energy or entertain their physical needs, it will be permissible for your peace and comfort. But it would be important to have them clearly understand before you go. The community remaining at Ossinen, he went on to explain, would have an important function. For Ossinen, like Megiddo, was a power center and the two were linked. The trio in Israel were to meditate for 30 minutes every afternoon from 3 o'clock, and the Ossinen group were to do the same at the corresponding New York time. And in addition hold 15 minutes meditations together at 3 o'clock and at 9 o'clock New York time. To facilitate the concentration and focusing of the energy, they should put a crystal on the map of Israel in the middle of their circle. Andrija asked what sort of crystal should be used. Tom said he would have to consult for the answer, and after a pause said that Joseph of Aragon, the leader of the Aragon, the civilization concerned with healing, who had recently incarnated on Earth as the Brazilian healer Jose Adigo, had said that Andrija had a blue crystal of great healing power. Okay, we will use that one, said Andrija, showing no surprise at Joseph of Aragon's clairvoyance. When the Israel crisis was over, Tom said they must turn their attention to the work of using all possible media for the purpose of making the world aware of what was happening and what was going to happen. Tom, you must explain that there have been communications. It is in your hands how you explain the communications. We leave to you that decision. But you must explain that there will be of the nature of a landing. Andrija, if people can relate the landing to something known, like the Book of Revelation, it would make our work a little easier. Will such information be forthcoming? Tom asked. Are you requesting a complete interpretation of the Book of Revelation? No, I'm asking if Revelation, as it refers essentially to the second coming of Christ, is a guide to what is happening with respect to the landing. Tom, you are now in the 4th seal and the 6th church, so what you say is true, yes. Andrija, the biggest puzzle I have with Revelation is that half hour of silence in heaven before the first trumpet sound. Can you explain that? Tom replied, the vehicles which will come in silence, and also there will be silence upon the earth as those upon the planet come to recognize what is happening. I take it then that the half hour would be the 9 days that you once gave us as the duration of the landing? Tom, that is true. You understand that our time is not as yours. There will be great days of silence, for with the work that will follow the landing there will be some that will have fear in their hearts, but most will begin to take account of themselves. Over these weeks Tom had identified the 6 co-workers who, with a trio counting as one, would constitute the initial nuclear working party of 7, though he stressed that as the work progressed, some members of the peripheral 6 might relinquish the work and others take their place. For the final communication sessions before the trio left for Israel, Andrija and John, at Tom's request, managed to get Lyle Watson, Dr. Neil Hitchen, and Jim Hotak to come to Ossinen. So with Phyllis, Andrija, John and Colette, there were 7 of them crammed into the Faraday cage for the communication. Tom began with a short speech of encouragement and exhortation for the benefit of the visitors. For what you have chosen to do and for what you have been chosen to do in our heart, there is a great love for you. You take it upon yourself a great task, but it is done with love, and it is this love that will sustain you and bring into completion that which you have chosen. Remember this, it is only through the helping with the physical difficulties of the physical beings upon your planet Earth that the true message may be received. When it is not possible for their governments, their religious leaders, their medical profession, and their society to give them the help they need, it will be possible for you, through your faith and what you have put into motion, to be of help to them. They will begin to ask questions and to demand answers from their leaders, and when their leaders do not give them the answers, they will begin to see that there is more in this universe than they had been led to believe. And this is part of the preparation for the landing. For how can we arrive, how can we make our presence known if those upon your planet Earth do not believe in our existence? You have upon you one of the greatest services that can be performed, and we know that you will do it with humility, with sincerity, with compassion, and with balance. Andrija said he would like to give the visitors an opportunity to ask questions, and Lyle Watson was the first to speak. As this group reaches working strength, we can begin to appreciate why each of us has been chosen, each in a different area. Yet I am concerned that we are a white Anglo-Saxon group, and that there are talents and powers in other cultures that we don't seem to be availing ourselves of. Do you have any comparable groups in other cultures, or do we need to incorporate other cultures in our work? Tom answered, each of you in the core of the original group of 7, which in truth is 9, will be in the center of another group of 7, and such groups will multiply and spread across the planet, and will involve other cultures. You have in each of you special knowledge, special abilities, and you are all unusual people upon this planet, and there are 6 others that will be drawn to each of you. Although it had been many months since Lyle had directly participated in the work of the group, Tom said, in this time there have been other communications, and there have been arrangements. Lyle understood what was referred to. He said, ever since March, when I received an opening in the Philippines, a lot of things have happened to me. I'm not disturbed by these things because I feel that I am responsible for most of them, that the access to power I achieved at that time has resulted in a lot of random occurrences around me. Am I right in thinking that there are accidental side products of what I'm supposed to be doing? Any reader interested in knowing more about that, what Lyle was talking about here, should read his fascinating book, Gifts of Unknown Things. Tom, you have analyzed correctly that the energy within you and the power that has been transferred to you was sometimes out of control. It is important, Dr. Watson, for you to understand that there are those that do not seek the greatest benefit for the planet Earth, and you must understand that when there is fear within you or a negative force, those who would not benefit the planet Earth take from you that energy and create a situation. They cannot function and they cannot produce a phenomenon without the physical energy of those that exist on the physical planet Earth. But by the same token, those that work with you in understanding and who wish to benefit the planet Earth may use the energy of your goodness, your positiveness, and your enthusiasm to produce also and to bring to you those things that are necessary for you to proceed. Lyle said, these phenomena don't seem to end with me. They involve my family also. He had recently met his brother Andrew after a separation of some 10 years and had found that he was working in South Africa with another person named Watson, serving as channel and holding communications with alleged extraterrestrial contacts. I believe he's been in contact for about a year, Lyle said. It is more than that, Tom said. It is since the 3rd week of your August 1971. He is in communication with the civilization of Aragon. I have recently met Andrew Watson, and he confirmed to me that he was in the second half of that it was in the second half of August 1997 that his communications began, and also that the actual name Adagon occurs in them. Jim Hortax, John's eccentric erstwhile guru from California, a man with his own extraterrestrial contacts, who had regaled his studies at the California Institute of the Arts with reports of his conversations with contacts with names like Enoch, Maitreya, and Metatron, learned from Tom that he was from Altea. "This I have known," he said. "Yes," Tom said, "and you have known, and have you known that those from Altea are those of what you call Atlantis?" Jim said, "This has been told to me." Tom, because of the knowledge that is within your soul, and because of who you are, you have great abilities. But remember that you are dealing with a physical planet that is caught in heaviness. It is important that you find a way in the language of the people with whom you communicate to speak in terms that they may clearly understand, for they understand not in the abstract, as you do. You must bring your knowledge into focus for them. You have come a long way, and with your help and with the three, the message that must be communicated to the nation of Israel will prevent massacre and catastrophe. Jim said, "I should like to ask the meaning of the golden wreath that is to be laid in Israel," referring to something that had come through one of his own communicators, and that nobody presently understood, except apparently Tom, who answered. "It will be when the nation recognizes from where it comes and the reason for its existence. It means that only when the people of Israel become awakened and aware can this planet be saved." Jim Hortak and his wife were to remain at Asening while the three were away, and Tom said that Jim should be the spiritual leader of the group, should ensure that the meditation and prayer sessions were conducted properly, and that nobody participated in them while they were in a negative frame of mind. He gave elaborate instructions for the operation of proxy system to ensure that each member of the support group of the 6 should be present at every session, either in person or by proxy, and said that each of them should find on the hillside behind the house a small stone, put it in a box and carry it on their person for a short time to imbue it with their energy, so that if no personal proxies were available, it could be used in a last resort. Jim asked, "Are we to understand that the stones will be the equivalent of the Urim and Thummim to be directed to the vehicle of Kishon?" Jim asked, again using terms that nobody understood. "Yes," Tom said, "but remember that there is also one in this area where you are now, and it will be directed to that, and from that it will be directed to Kishon, and it will also go through the subterranean areas and perform a complete circle. Do you understand me?" "Yes, thank you," Jim said. When it was Colette's turn to put a question, she said, "I'm very disturbed by a channeling I did in January concerning certain visions about Israel which still haunt me. Can you tell me if I am to eliminate them, or if they are still pertinent?" Tom answered this with a display of Socratic virtuosity. "It is important you understand that there is knowledge released in the universe that many civilizations have access to. Let us give you an example. If you were in this nation, and you went perhaps to an Oriental nation and spent some time there, and then left and went, let's just say, to Brazil, and if in the 3 nations you visited, you learned only a portion of the language, you would only receive a portion of the information released. Do you follow this?" "Yes, I do," said Colette. "And do you understand that the civilizations that exist within the universe are all physical civilizations?" "Yes." "And that those that are physical have emotions?" "Yes." "And that perhaps at times the emotions is misguided?" "Yes." To return to your question, we ask you to eliminate these visions from your mind, and we give you the reasons why. Your power, and you have got power, as all in this room have, is a special power, and if it is misused, which it may be in error, and not deliberately, or if a fear is created within you, this power may then be used by others to create a situation. There are those that exist in the universe that would like each of you to have a fear within you, so that your power then may be misused. Remember, your power is the type of power that it is not in balance. If it is not in balance, may be used by either the positive or the negative. And what we have said to this lady, we say to each of you, Tom concluded. Neil Hitchinson next asked a number of questions and received answers that had been significant for him personally, and when the visitors had all had their say, Andrija had a final question to ask. In the last week, he said, we'd had many things happening in the house here that cannot be explained scientifically, like clocks going backwards and forwards, coins and things appearing and disappearing, events too innumerable to mention. Now, are we to assume that this is your work, or that one of your civilizations is doing it? You asked for a proof, did you not? Tom said. Yes, Andrija said with a laugh. Well, thank you. We've had a lot of proofs. Tom said, if we had given you but one, you would have had said it was an accident. Before concluding this already very long chapter, I must add a brief note on Uri. Though he was not directly involved in the work during the period covered by this book, there are frequent references to him and to his state of mind and heart in the communication. Since he had ceased working with Andrija, he had often repudiated his extraterrestrial connections and confessed himself as mystified as anyone as to the nature and origin of the paranormal powers that he now exploited chiefly for publicity and entertainment. His critics, stage magicians like James Randi and Milbourne Christopher, mounted a fairly successful campaign to demystify him in the eyes of the general public and expose him as nothing more than a clever conjurer. The effect of this was further to discredit Andrija's claims for the cosmic connection as published in Uri. In the communications, Tom continually maintained that Uri really belonged with a group and might eventually return to work with them, but he had to concede that the management's first modern-age prodigy and harbinger had rather failed in his mission. The reason, he said, was that he had succumbed to the hazard that threatened all beings that came to Earth, attraction to the physical, and also because the civilization that had programmed him for his mission on Earth had given him an excess of ego. All is not lost, but all has not gone according to plan, Tom said, apropos Uri on the 7th of November 1974, and he urged that it was important that John and Andrija should carry to fruition a plan they get together for a conference of all the scientists who had worked with Uri. The conference was held at Tarrytown, New York, in February 1975, and John put up part of the funding necessary to bring physicists from all over the world, not physicists. An assurance was given to the participants that there would be no reporters present and no publicity, and that the purpose of the conference was simply to enable scientists who had worked with Geller to share their experiences and discuss their ideas about them with professional colleagues. This exchange of views and experiences would, it was hoped, serve to validate the Geller effects to an influential scientific minority, and to encourage members of that minority to speak out publicly. Some have spoken out, but rarely to an audience so large as Uri's most energetic critic, James Randi, has frequently been able to command on television. And when Professor John Taylor of London presented his researches and views on a televised Royal Society lecture and debate in September 1975, the attitude of the majority of his audience was skeptical, even hostile. To this day, a majority of the general public probably believe that Uri Geller has been exposed, so the following brief report on a number of Tarrytown Conference contributions is relevant, if only to redress the balance of evidence put forward in what should be an ongoing public debate. Geller's ability to bend spoons by stroking them is well known and has been apparently duplicated by some of his conjurer critics, but his effect on the unusual metal alloy nitinol is not so well known. It was reported to the conference by Eldon Bird, a scientist at the Naval Surface Weapons Center, Silver Spring, Maryland. Nitinol is known as the metal with a memory, for when it is heated it immediately remembers and adopts the shape in which it was originally manufactured, no matter how much it has been twisted, scrunched or bent. To erase a memory and give a piece of nitinol a new shape, the metal has to be heated to a temperature above 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Bird reported several experiments in which Geller had succeeded in producing a kink in a piece of nitinol wire that had been manufactured in a straight configuration. In the first experiment, after the kink appeared, Bird put the wire into boiling water, but instead of snapping back into a straight shape, it developed a right angle bend. Even after it had been re-annealed into a straight shape by having an electric current pass through it until it was almost molten, the nitinol wire, when it cooled, developed the kink that Geller had formed in it. Bird confessed to the conference, "At present I have no scientific explanation for what happened. I can say that the possibility of fraud on Geller's part can be virtually ruled out. Because of the unusual properties of nitinol, the scientific controls essential for any investigation are, for the most part, built into the testing material. Geller would have had to palm a source of high heat or substitute his own personal manufactured or previously altered pieces of nitinol if deception is to be the explanation of the events that took place. Two highly unlikely possibilities." Another expert on metals who contributed to the conference was Dr. Wilbur Franklin, chairman of the Department of Physics at Kent State University. Using an electron microscope to study fractures produced by Geller in two spoons, a needle and a platinum ring, Dr. Franklin discovered that these do not always have the characteristics of normal fractures produced by fatigue. On the platinum ring, which had fractured in Geller's presence but without his touching it, the electron microscope revealed two fractures only 1/100 of an inch apart, and one of these resembled a cleavage that would normally occur at a temperature of minus 195 centigrades, while the other appeared to have occurred at platinum's melting temperature of 1773 degrees. Dr. Franklin concluded from his observation that the evidence based on metallurgical analysis of the fracture's surfaces indicate that a paranormal influence must have been operative in the formation of the fractures. Ronald Hawke, a scientist at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory of the University of California, reported observations of a quite different kind of Geller effect. He set Uri the task of erasing or altering the magnetic programs stored on cards used to feed information into a computer. The magnetic patterns encoding the information are stored in a layer of iron dioxide, which has a protecting covering of plastic. A computer will reject a card if the information pattern on it are ambiguous. Two cards which Geller attempted to influence simply by lightly stroking the plastic surface were accepted by the computer before he touched them, but rejected after he had done so, and subsequent inspection with a magnetic viewer revealed that the magnetic pattern had been changed. Two English physicists, Professor John Hasted of Birkbeck College, University of London, and Dr. Edward Beston of Cambridge, reported personal observations and a series of controlled experiments with Uri Geller. In addition to metal bending phenomena, Geller produced in their presence two other paranormal effects. First, he caused an acceleration in the pulse Geiger or pulse rate of a Geiger counter, and second, he apparently caused a dematerialization event. The latter was a quite unexpected occurrence. The experiment was designed to test whether Geller could alter the atomic structure of crystals of vanadium carbide, a substance as hard and brittle as thin glass. The crystals were sealed in pharmaceutical cellulose capsules, and were placed on a metal plate. Hasted held his hand over the plate, and Geller slowly moved his hand a few inches above Hasted's. Suddenly, one of the capsules gave a little jump. It was quite intact, but when it was opened, they found that the crystal disc within it had not only fractured, but half of it had disappeared. It could not have passed through the wall of the capsule, which was undamaged, nor could it have been removed by anyone. It had simply dematerialized. Both Professor Hasted and Professor John Tyler of King's College, University of London, in addition to working with Geller himself, had studied the Geller effect, produced by children and others whose paranormal abilities had initially been activated by watching Uri on television. Their reports on their observations and controlled experiments with the children were substantiated or given greater credibility by a long report by a South African parapsychologist, Dr. Alan Price, who had conducted a painstakingly field study of the Geller effect among the South African population during and after a month's visit that Uri paid to the country in 1974 of the July. After checking and screening hundreds of reports and eliminating the dubious ones, Dr. Price ended up with no fewer than 137 cases that he judged to be entirely authentic. The few contributions to the Tarrytown Conference that I have been able to summarize here are certainly enough to show that Uri's powers are immensely varied and quite genuine. Whether they are a gift with which he is endowed by virtue of his extraterrestrial origin and connections is a question that the most scrupulous validation of the phenomena themselves leaves unanswered, and probably the most we can reasonably say is that the phenomena are so bizarre that the evidence for their authenticity diminishes the improbability of the idea that the energy involved is channeled rather than generated by Uri. In a communication on the 7th November 1974, Tom said of both Bobby Horn and Uri, "At different times they were both given opportunities on Earth, and if they had succeeded they would have become heads of civilizations. But because of their attraction to the physical, they were never successful. When the three of you volunteered for this mission, the two of them begged to come back also, because they realized it was important to overcome their failures, and they were sure that with the help of the three they would be able to accomplish this. But, as you see, they are both again trapped in the physical. However, there was still hope that Uri would eventually return to work with the group. He had the nature of his people and was merciful and stubborn. He had the nature of his people, was mercurial and stubborn, but, like the nation of Israel, he could yet be made aware of his true nature and purpose, and Tom cautioned Andrija, John and Phyllis not to write him off prematurely. He said, you do not bury those that are breathing." So, that was the end of chapter 7. He says here at the bottom, "For full reports of the investigations of the participants and other scientists who have studied Geller, see the Geller Report." Charles Panatti, Boston, 1976. The next chapter is entitled Walking on Eggs. So, Stuart Holroyd was born 1933. Would have been about my mum's age. Or that. Bye.